now time for the Billy C. Show, part of the BillyCBoxing.com network.
And we're coming to you live from the Billy C. Studios in Lake George, New York. I'm Bill Calogero, and it's time for the Billy C. Show. Good morning, good day, good evening, whenever you're watching, whenever you're listening. I hope you're doing okay today. Today's show is being brought to us in part by the Title Bout Championship computer game. Get yourself a copy right now. Visit our website, www.BillyCBoxing.com, and click on the Title Bout Championship computer game banner. Also, SouthernGourmetSpice.com. Kenny Bear's barbecue rub, the best on the planet. Plus, my new favorite is his Cajun spice, or blackened spice, I think it's called. Either way, I'm almost out, Kenny, so get me some more. But got to get it. SouthernGourmetSpice.com. And finally, my book. Yeah, I'm still hawking the book. Tom Molyneux, From Bondage to Baddest Man on the Planet, is available right now where all good books are sold. Get yourself a copy today. Just visit BarnesandNoble.com or Amazon.com. So I'll do that. Hey, it's been a while. You know what Billy C always says. Who is this? I always say, I enjoy company. So I'm glad you guys are joining me right now. A few things I want to talk about. We're going to have DaxCon join us in a little bit, and also my man Alex Papali. I wanted to cover a few things today. Number one, a couple of big fights yesterday. I'll get to that in a second. I also wanted to talk about the announcement of the projected, or at least planned, Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua fight, scheduled to take place sometime in June. And, of course, the thing that rattled my cage and actually lit the fire under my ass to do this show, the passing of Marvin Hagler. I want to start with that real quickly. Well, you know what? We're going to talk a lot about that. So let me get to the fight results. In the welterweight division last night, Virgil Hill. There's a blast from the past, right? Virgil Ortiz improved to 17-0 with 17 knockouts when he stopped Maurice Hooker in the seventh round. Hooker drops to 27-2 with three of his wins, or three of his fights coming into a draw. But I'm a little rusty. Man. 19 of his wins came by way of knockout. He was a former junior welterweight champion, moving up to fight Ortiz. It was a pretty action-packed fight, old school, and enjoyed it. The fight that I was really looking forward to, and I watched, of course, was Lawrence Oakley. He improved to 16-0 with 13 knockouts when he stopped former world champion Krzysztof Glowaski in the sixth round. Glowaski drops to 31-3 with 19 knockouts. He won the WBO cruiserweight title. It was vacant. And Oakley, he was ranked only by the WBO at number 7. And Krzysztof Glowaski was ranked number 1 by the WBO. Lawrence Oakley was ranked number 2 by the WBO. Glowaski was ranked number 1 by the WBO and number 13 in the IBF. From what I heard, he was a 3-1 favorite. Oakley was in that fight, 3-1 favorite, which kind of surprised me. I mean, Oakley, I enjoy watching him. He's a big guy, real big for cruiserweight division. He did say he had plans to move up into the heavyweight division, and he really seemed to be giving Glowaski trouble, who was at the top of that division for a long time. I was surprised at the odds, but I guess the odds makers were correct because the way the fight went was Oakley all the way. It seemed like Glowaski was having some trouble with the height. And in the light heavyweight division, Artur Beterbiev stopped Adam Dean's in the 10th round to retain his WBC and IBF World Light Heavyweight titles. He improves to 16-0, all coming by knockout. And Adam Deans drops to 19 wins, 2 losses, and a draw, with 10 of his wins coming by knockout. I wasn't psyched for this fight, and I didn't watch it. The truth of the matter is that Beater Beaver, this was a stay busy fight. They miraculously ranked Adam Deans in the IBF. He all of a sudden appeared in the rankings. Wasn't anywhere in the rankings on any of the other top sanctioning bodies. So makes you wonder about that fight. It wasn't going to be a challenging fight to me at all. The Ortiz-Hooker fight was, and I thought Oakley and Glowacki would have been too. One other fight I want to point out in the Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, Chop Chop Corley. I mention this because I know DeMarcus personally fought on some of my cards. He's 46-year-old. He entered into the Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship. Reggie Barnett stopped him in the 4th round officially when Chop Chop Corley threw in the towel. He was getting battered. 46 years old. I hope he's okay, and I hope things aren't so bad for him that he needed to do that. But anyway, Marvelous Marvin Hagler passed away unexpectedly last week. What can you say? I got several emails from people. I got a phone call from my man Augie in Riverhead, which incidentally, he told me he was watching another show, which I'll mention. I never mention other shows, but Max Kellerman, I guess, has a show now. I don't even pay attention, but and Augie told me that Max said that he thought Sugar Ray Leonard won the fight, but thought Marvin Hagler was a better fighter. And when Augie told me that yesterday afternoon, it's been sitting and resonating with me, and I want to comment on it. First of all, and we'll talk about this a little later, because both Dax and Alex were with me when one year we were up at the Hall of Fame, and there's been a lot of discussion about the Marvin Hagler Sugar Ray Leonard fight. And when I watched the fight live, and over all these years, I've watched the fight a lot. Okay, I don't know, 100 times, really, that many times. And every time I scored the fight, I had the fight come out to a draw. When I watched the fight without scoring it, I always thought Hagler won the fight. We did a 1 year up at the Hall of Fame. The people that were involved with the show at the time and some listeners, I had rented a room, and we all watched the fight without sound. And we scored it. Everyone scored it. We paused it after each round, discussed it. Now, this was a collection of people that, were very adamant about how they felt that fight go initially. And it was pretty surprising to see, including my man Alex, who incidentally is covered with Marvin Hagler. He's got a tattoo of the best tattoo I've ever seen of Marvin Hagler. And I mean, Alex is a huge fan of the Marvelous One. And even his scores were tight, slightly different. When you're watching the fight, scoring it without sound, it was surprising to hear the comments from people who were shocked at themselves for the way they scored this fight. I always scored the fight a draw. And now some of the rounds I had different. I'd flip-flop one round. One time I'd give the round to Hagler. One time I'd give the round to Sugar Ray. But my assessment of the fight was simple afterwards. Now, all these years later, it's simple. It wasn't simple then, but it's simple now. And here's the thing. Hagler didn't fight his fight. He started that fight trying to basically outbox Sugar Ray Leonard, which was a mistake. There was some signs in that fight. We all pointed it out. How he was clowning around, and he wasn't himself in that fight. Should he have come forward and fight that fight like he normally does, like the destroyer Hagler used to be? I don't think we are having this discussion so many years later. The other thing about the fight was Sugar Ray Leonard had an extremely smart game plan. He stole some rounds by coming on strong in the last 30 seconds or so, which I'm sure swayed the judges. But the one thing, and Augie was saying, well, Hagler was the aggressor. He should have been. Yeah, he was chasing Leonard around the ring, but he wasn't landing any punches. Leonard was doing a smart thing by avoiding shots and everything else. To suggest that Hagler was a better fighter than Sugar Ray Leonard, that is the part of the statement that Max apparently made on his show that I can't get past. And I'll tell you why. There's an argument for both. I think that the case of Marvin Hagler and Sugar Ray Leonard, when you look at the two of them, Marvin Hagler was the same kind of fighter. He was the fighter that did what he did. He's a Hall of Famer, first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the greatest middleweights of all time. Put him in any era, and he's going to be good. Sugar Ray Leonard did some things that were above and beyond what normal fighters do. I'm not suggesting Hagler was normal. But Hagler pretty much stayed in the middleweight division his whole career. Leonard moved around a little bit. Leonard had some dance partners that were made his career. He went up in weight, challenged himself. The fight against Hagler was a challenge, a guy coming off of retirement. I don't know if that's a statement that can be made either way. I don't think Leonard was a better fighter than Hagler, but I don't think Hagler was a better fight than Leonard. I think that they were two different fighters, and you can't say that in this particular case. You could turn around and say Tyson was a better fighter than so-and-so, or Rocky Marciano was a better fighter than so-and-so, and so on and so on. You could say Leonard was a better fighter than Hearns, or Hearns was a better fighter than Leonard. Whatever you want to say. There's a lot of fighters you can say that about. But I think with Marvin Hagler and Sugar Ray Leonard, those two fighters, I don't think you can say one was better than the other. I don't think that this fight proved it. Like I said all along, and for all these years, I thought the fight ended in a draw. Marvin Hagler, he got pissed off, walked away from the sport. We never saw a rematch. The truth of the matter is that Marvin Hagler felt that he was robbed. Remember something, this fight changed boxing. And the reason why it changed boxing is up to this point, the challenger had to knock out the champion or really beat the shit out of him. That wasn't the case in this fight. It was a close fight. Could have gone either way. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion about it to this day, but realistically, it was a close fight. Could have gone either way. The judges scoring it for Sugar Ray Leonard, who was the media darling at the time, pissed Marvin Hagler off, pissed off a lot of fans. But that's the way it was. The problem with this fight is that because it changed the sport, we've seen many fights like this, where you have a dominating champion going into a fight and losing his belt against a challenger in a close, could have gone either way kind of a fight. I remember watching Jimmy Young fight Muhammad Ali on Wild World of Sports and was shocked when they handed Ali the title back. It was a title defense. I thought Jimmy Young beat the snot out of Ali from ring post to ring post in that fight. I mean, it wasn't a power slugfest, but I mean, he outboxed Ali. And because he didn't dominate, because he didn't drop Ali, that was the unwritten rule. It changed in this fight, when they fought. That's for sure, back in 1987. Marvin Hagler, when you look at Hagler's record, come on. He fought everybody that was available to him during his era. Ray Leonard, John the Beast Mugabe. Now, remember, John the Beast Mugabe, this fight, actually, Sugar Ray Leonard has admitted that he saw some stuff in this fight that prompted him to go after Hagler. He thought that he lost the step. This fight went 11 rounds. John the Beast Mugabe was a killer. But there was one thing. He was really more effective as a junior middleweight than he was as a middleweight. He did move up in weight, and it was a back-and-forth fight until Hagler knocked him out in the 11th. Tommy Hearns, they fought. That was the best 3 rounds of live boxing I ever witnessed in my life. I'll never forget the fight. And if you've never seen it, you better punch it up and watch it. Great fight. Mustafa Hamshaw, another opponent of Hagler's that was a highly rated fighter who Hagler took care of. Juan Domingo Roldan, another fighter that passed away. He was stopped in 10. The great Roberto Duran, even though Duran moved up substantially. Caveman Lee, Vito Anafirmo, Alan Minter when he won the title, Bobby Watts. I mean, the name Sugar Ray Seals, Benny Briscoe. I mean, Benny Briscoe, Philadelphia fighter, was a fighter that was highly regarded. Willie the Pearl Monroe. I mean, all of these fighters that he fought on his way up. This was an old school fighter. Hagler, in his time, he was an old school fighter. Clearly an old school fighter now compared to today's styles. Marvin Hagler was a guy that was a blue-collar fighter through and through. He was, when he walked away from the sport, he walked away, became the Arnold Schwarzenegger of sorts in Italy with the Italian films. I remember he was very hard to get close to, although he loved going to the Hall of Fame. I remember one of our listeners, Dave Wilcox, who was part of the show for a long time, almost pissed all over him when he was shot. This was like his idol, and he's in the bathroom, and who's standing next to him is Hagler, and Dave turns around, all excited, and I don't know if he caught Marvin with a stream or not, but the moral of the story is when you got Hagler, he alone where you could talk to him, which I personally never did. He was a cool guy, from what I understand, but he did keep his distance from the sport. He was turned off, and rightfully so. The rematch never happened. Not only was he robbed of a rematch, but we as the fans were robbed as a rematch. About his death, well, every shot I saw of him, he was seemingly in great shape. 66 years old, that's young today. He still was running and still doing things. He wasn't an old 66. I'll never forget seeing Joe Louis at a fight. He was in Vegas. I wasn't live. I was watching it live on TV, and they have him in a wheelchair. I'll never forget the shot of him. He's got his hat on, and he looks so old. And then to find out he was like 67 years old, 68 years old, and he looked like he was 140. Hagler looked good. Hagler still looked like Hagler. Still looked like he could open up a can of whoop ass on you. Reports, nothing definitive has been publicized, but it sounds to me like it was a heart attack. There was some misinformation floating around that he got the vaccine for COVID-19 and died from that. That's not true. His wife came on and did make a statement that was indeed not true. But Marvin Hagler, one of the greatest of all time, and we're going to miss him for sure. I don't know when you start talking about the Marvelous One, who you can really compare to him, especially today, because there's not many that you can. I mean, it is what it is. It's a shame we lost him. I think his loss is a huge impact on the sport, especially for people that are big-time boxing fans. It shook me. It shook me, that's for sure. But in any event, hey, I was talking about Kenny Bears. don't forget to get yourself a bottle of his new stuff. I love his Cajun Black and Seasoned, and also his regular barbecue rub, which is second to none. Speaking of second to none, joining us right now is my man, Dax Khan. Good morning, Dax.
Good morning, Billy C. It's been a while.
Yeah, I was real rusty kicking off the show, but I think we're going to be back. There's a lot of stuff to discuss. There's some big fights coming up, but first, let's talk about Marvin Hagler. I know you were a big fan, and I mentioned earlier, and I wanted you to talk more about it too. But when we all got together to watch that Hagler Sugar Ray Leonard fight, I mean, it kind of opened up a lot of people's eyes. But give us some thoughts on Marvin Hagler, the fighter, first, and what the loss means to you.
Well, excuse me, sorry, I'm drinking coffee at the same time. Without a doubt, it was a shock. Marvin Hagler has never been one of those guys who is in the media a lot. He's never been one of those fighters who craved attention, even when he was active. So, the only time really in the last probably decade or two that you heard about Marvin Hagler is either when he was making an appearance at the Hall of Fame, or there was something about him in Italy where he was a huge star over in Italy. In films and, just in pop culture in general. And without a doubt, Marvin Hagler, in a way, was, the king of the four kings, considering Duran, Leonard, and Hearns were at welterweight, and Marvin was at middleweight, and that was at a time where the higher the weight class, the more dominant, the fighter was considered. Again, that was back in an era unlike today that the heavyweight champion of the world was the champion of the world. So, the light heavyweight champion, then came the middleweight champion, then came the welterweight champions. So, in that sense, you loved Marvin Hagler because he was a blue-collar guy, and for those reasons, like I stated, he wasn't, a media darling. He didn't look for that attention. He had that one mindset of war. You would see it on his hat. You would see it on, for several fights. He's the type of guy that you could actually picture living in your neighborhood or running into one day. So that is a reason why, you thought to yourself, Marvin Hagler is the common, everyday, genuine blue fighter that everybody really aspired towards, because they are the type of guy he was relatable to, if that makes sense. Yeah. The most relatable to out of the four kings.
Yeah, it does, because it is hard. I mean, that era with especially the four kings, all great fighters. But I know what you're saying. Hagler had this feel about him that. Just whether you loved him or hated him, he drew you to him, and it was every time you mention Marvin, the fight that comes to my mind isn't the Sugar Ray Leonard fight. It's the Tommy Hearns fight. I mean, that fight made such an impact on me, and it should have made it on the sport. Sometimes, and you're more into the social media than me, but sometimes I get the feel that it's almost a forgotten fight. Do you ever feel that way?
Hagler and Hearns? No, not at all. And just to reiterate real quick, when I said, like the king of the king, that doesn't mean that I feel Marvin was the best boxer of them. Just at that time, popularity went according to weight classes, and Marvin being the middleweight champion and the other guys being the smaller champions was my point. But no, that's not a forgotten fight at all. It's talked about by even young fans that were not around at that point in time, and they seen it on only on YouTube, or maybe highlights on ESPN. It is one of the greatest 3 rounds of all time. But personally, my most memorable Marvin Hagler fight for me personally was his fight against John Mugabe, and that's only because I was a young kid and I watched it live, and it was such a great card. I believe Thomas Hearns knocked out James Schuler, and I believe it was the second round. You had I think Steve Darnell was on there. Richie Sandoval suffered his first loss. That was but the war between Marvin and Mugabe. I forget how long that went, about 10 rounds it was, and it was just back and forth and forth. And what I understand, I believe the rumor was that Marvin Hagler actually peed blood for a week after that fight.
Yeah, it went 11 rounds, and Mugabe, I remember the lead up to that fight actually thinking John the Beast Mugabe, and a lot of experts thought that he was going to upset Hagler. Hagler, at that point, people were starting to use the he's getting old thing and everything else. The thing about John the Beast, and this isn't about him, but this was a guy that I didn't even think reached his full potential, Dax. He had trouble with weight throughout his career. Was in the junior middleweight division, so he did move up for this fight. But yep, you're right. It was a great fight. But the talk most people do, and just to go back to my original question to you, I'm glad for you to inform me that a lot of young fans do talk about the Hearns Hagler fight, because it made an impact on me, and I can watch the fight. As a matter of fact, we're gonna have Alex come on a little bit, and he updated his tattoo, and I was looking at the tattoo, and I'm talking to him, and I go, before I talk to him, I'm going, he's got the friggin' blood coming down off of Hagler's head. The only time I ever saw Hagler,
did he really?
in the Hearns fight, remember after that round, the blood was trickling down. Well, Alex has that part of his tattoo. It's great. But anyway, Sugar Ray Leonard fight, and I got a call from, I don't know if you caught this earlier, but I got a call from one of our big fans in Riverhead, Long Island, my man Augie. And he made a statement, which I'll get to in a second. But remember the fight against Leonard, and we watched it. We all watched it without sound, and we were surprised. Most people that were involved in that were surprised that their own opinions and own previous scores were slightly different. Tell us what you went through when we watched that day.
Yeah, one thing to point out is, even as a kid, I remember a lot of diehard fans who were disgusted with that outcome. I have an uncle that actually stopped watching boxing because of that outcome. And not so much he was a Hagler fan, he was a fan of Leonard, he was a fan of both, but he truly believed that Marvin Hagler won that fight due to the reasons that you mentioned earlier, that, to become the champion, you have to beat the champion, and Hagler was the champion at the time. And still to this day, a lot of, fans who were really into the sport back then, that watch on a regular basis, will still say the same thing, that Marvin Hagler should have won that fight, and we were, a lot of us were surprised that night that we were up in Canastota. I think that was 2012 or 2011 that we were up there and we did that, and I think all but one of us actually had Hagler winning that fight. And then I think everybody at the end, if I'm not mistaken, had Ray ahead slightly.
I don't remember what the scores were, but what I do remember, first of all, I've always scored that fight a draw, and I did that day as well, but I had flip-flop rounds. Some rounds previously I had given to Hagler, some I gave to Leonard. But what surprised me most when we watched it that day was how many people in that room who were talking, because remember, we all had the discussion and stuff before the fight, how they felt the fight went, and then during the fight, how their scores changed. Remember we discussed after each round who scored what, and that was pretty fun. I wish we did that more often, but it was a tough fight. I just, to this day, I don't think that it should have been anything less than a draw, because we would have seen the rematch. It pissed Hagler off so much, he walked away from the sport, never to return. The two fighters that I respect the most for doing that was Marvin Hagler and, of course, Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis walked away as a champion, which is pretty tough to do, especially in today's world when they're throwing all kinds of money at you. And Hagler just felt wronged by the sport that he gave his basically his life to, and it just didn't work out.
One thing to point out about Hagler is an old story that I've heard before, and Iceman John Scully, I believe, is who reminded me of it a day or two after Hagler died, and that's Marvin spent his whole career with the Petronelli brothers.
Right.
They trained him, they managed him, and Hagler was not early on in his career, looked at as a guy that was going to be an all-time great. But the Petronelli brothers, they believed in him. And then once he started making big money for his fights, one of the Petronelli brothers, or the both Petronelli brothers, approached him and said, listen, instead of taking the contracted 10%, how about you just pay us a flat fee? And this way, Marvin was able to maintain more of his purse. They wanted him to be able to maintain as much of his purse as possible instead of the opposite, where, they were figuring out a way where they can get more of his money. And Hagler actually replied to them that, you're going to take your standard 10% and we're not going to have this conversation again, or I'll fire you both. Which is, it's unheard of today. It's unheard. I mean, it's pretty much unheard of throughout history, but that just speaks volumes of the relationship that those three had together, and how they were able to start from square one and build a legacy.
I remember he was one of the last guys, I think, and maybe different, one of the last guys that followed the old Rocky Marciano. He used to jog in work boots, construction boots, and do all of that, old school stuff, which he was an old school fighter then, compared to today. But anyway, here's a statement. My man Augie said he was watching Max Kellerman, and Max was talking about the fight, and he made this statement that he said he thought Sugar Ray Leonard won the fight, but he thought Hagler was a better fighter. Well, I can't let go of that, because I think you can make an argument for two fighters that are in the same weight class. I think you and I know we did it with heavyweights, but I know we could have this discussion and say who was a better fighter, whether we agree with each other or not, and give cases why. I think in this case, in my opinion, Dax, and maybe you have a different one, I don't think you can say that about these two guys. I think that Sugar Ray Leonard may have accomplished more in terms of, moving up in weight and fighting, challenging himself here and there, where Hagler was in the same division his whole career. But that fight, to me, didn't say that Hagler was better. I don't think Hagler, I think they were two different fighters. I think this is one pair of fighters you cannot say one was better than the other. I think it's similar with Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather, although I think Pacquiao is actually a better fighter. I think, in all due respect to Mayweather, you can't really say that about those. What's your thoughts on Max thinking that Sugar Ray won the fight, but Hagler's a better fighter?
Oh, well, one, imagine in this era, staying in one weight division your whole career. Who are you ducking? You're ducking every fighter with a license, according to today's fans. But in that statement, the way I would take that is Hagler was the better fighter in terms of just that word, a fighter. I believe Ray was a better boxer, but as a stand there, come forward, trade fighter, Hagler was definitely, better of the two. Ray was more flashy. Ray moved more. Ray was more appealing to the eye. But, in terms of, just going in there and let's see who walks out of here, still standing upright, I would say Marvin Hagler every day of the week, just because Hagler was just, not that Sugar Ray was not tough. I'm just saying, Marvin Hagler just had that different mindset. Kind of like that thing that you'll see on social media passed around, where they'll have two groups of fighters, and they'll say they'll ask each other, who would you rather have watching your back in a bar fight or a street fight? If you asked me, would I rather have Marvin Hagler, or would I rather have Sugar Ray standing behind me in a bar fight? I'd definitely pick Marvin Hagler every day of the week. If that makes any sense.
No, it does. It does. Looking at Hagler's last three fights, obviously my favorite, Tommy Hearns in April of 1985, 3 rounds of it was just great, great fight. The only fight that comes close is Benny Kid Paret against Gene Fulmer. That fight was, that was 10 rounds of nonstop. But you look at the Hearns fight, and it was a war. That was the name of the fight, too, if I recall correctly. They billed it as the war.
Yeah, they did, man. But Marvin had that mindset all the time.
Well, this is what I'm getting at. All right? So you got Tommy Hearns, war, right? He steps in the ring a year later against the Beast Mugabe. And, for all intent purposes, that fight was a war as well. It started a little slow, but it was a back-and-forth fight until the end in the 11th of 12 rounds. And then he steps in the ring with Sugar Ray Leonard in 1987, all a year apart. These fights, April of 85 was the Hearns fight. March of 86 was the Mugabe fight. April of 87 was the Sugar Ray Leonard fight, all 1 year apart, basically. And he goes into that with that fight plan to try to outbox Sugar Ray Leonard in the first half of the fight. What do you think he was thinking?
I think Ray was in his head a little bit. I think that might have been the only time that, looking at Marvin's career, he felt a little bit disrespected by the media.
Oh, he was. He was.
That, and between Ray kind of being in his head, I think Marvin wanted to, and again, I'm speculating, prove that he can outdo, he could beat Ray at his own game.
Well, that pretty much, I think, let Sugar Ray steal that fight in a sense, because and he also switched. Remember, he's a southpaw fighter, but he switched to orthodox for a little bit in that fight, which was also a mistake. And he was clowning around. He was doing things that were not Marvin Hagler. And I wonder if that swayed the judges. I mean, we watched that fight a million times. You think that swayed the judges? That
could be. I just believe that he was taken out of his mindset a little bit, Bill, because he felt disrespected, and not by Ray Leonard personally, just by the overall build-up of that fight. Remember, leading up to that fight, even though Hagler was the middleweight champion, focus was on Ray Leonard pretty much
all the time, and I think that's what bothered Marvin Hagler the most. But I listen, Marvin Hagler, I was shocked that he died when I heard the announcement during that fight. I was shocked, and it's easy to say because it's become a cliche, but I don't think there'll ever be a fighter like Marvin Hagler again. I think the sport has changed. I think the mindset of fighters have changed. I think the business of boxing has changed. And the Marvin Hagler, the road Marvin Hagler took from becoming a professional fighter all the way until his last fight wasn't an easy one. And he fought everybody that was available to him on their way out and on their way up throughout his career. And I just hope, it's a shame that fighters have a tendency, especially fighters, have a tendency to get more recognition after we lose them. I think Marvin Hagler was getting the recognition that he deserved while he was still with us. I think he should be getting even more now that he's gone. What's your thoughts?
No, my thought is actually anytime a discussion comes up on who the greatest middleweight of all time is, it's either Marvin Hagler, it's Sugar Ray Robinson, or it's Carlos Monzon. So I don't think at all that Marvin Hagler doesn't get the accolades that he deserves. And in terms of fighting everyone, the sport has changed so much, politics-wise and money-wise. To Marvin Hagler or anybody, we're really not going to see that. But I would probably say, even though the level of competition isn't as good, the only other person within recent years that kind of had that same mentality of, let's fight, I'll fight anybody at any point in time, just put him into the ring, is Golovkin.
Right, but he didn't have the dance partners.
Yeah, exactly, that's what I'm saying. But I'm saying just that mindset of, let's just go in here and let's fight. No talk, no build up, no hoopla. Let's just go in there and let's see who's the best. Hagler, we'll talk with our hands, not our mouth.
I agree. Hagler is a top fighter in any era, and I think that is the definition today. When you talk about who was better, eras, blah blah blah. When you could take a fighter and insert him in any era, and he's still successful. To me, that defines a great fighter. Stanley Ketchel.
I actually have this poster that I'll show you one day from, I think it was 1997 Boxing Hall of Fame, where I have all four. I have Marvin Hagler, Roberto Duran, and Sugar Ray Leonard, and Tommy Hearns all signed the poster. Also Benitez signed the poster. And I have a lot of Archie Moore and a lot of other guys, but I have all four Kings sign that poster.
That's cool. When did you get all of them to sign?
And back in '97.
They were all there.
I believe that I brought it back another year, but in '97, I believe it was Marvin, and I think it was Tommy, and I think Ray.
What was for Hagler? And then I got some other stuff. But what was the fight that you thought that made the biggest impact on you?
Me, as I stated earlier, was the Mugabe fight, because that was the first fight. Again, I was only about 12. That was the first time that I ever sat down and was really excited and watched the full entire fight card by myself. I forget where everybody else in the family was, but I seen Marvin Hagler and Tommy Hearns were going to be on TV, and I actually blew everything up, my friends off. I blew everything off and sat there and watched it, and I was just mesmerized by that war between Mugabe and Hagler.
You talk about great middleweights and Sugar Ray Robinson, of course, Marvin Hagler. The two names that pop into my head that I know that Hagler would fit in with the all-time greats and could be successful in every era. But Stanley Ketchel and Harry Greb are two middleweights that, if you did have a time machine and you could put these guys in, I would love to see how he would have done against those two guys, because those are another pair of middleweights that I feel could have been successful in any era, especially Harry Greb. I mean, Stanley Ketchel, all right, he was just a come at you, slayer, so to speak. But how do you think he would have done against those two?
I think I actually would have picked Hagler, because I believe Hagler, while they all had that same mentality, I believe Marvin was a better boxer, at least from, footage that I've seen on both of those guys.
Couple of things real quick. Last night we had a couple of fights. Virgil Ortiz, Maurice Hooker. It was an exciting fight. There you go. There was a throwback fight. Do you think Ortiz gets a shot at one of the top welterweights next?
I'd like to see him hold off a little bit, me personally.
Well, who's there for him? Who would you like to see him fight?
I would like to see him fight maybe, David Avanesian. I'd like them to see Jesse Vargas, Sergey Lipinets. Some ex-champions that are still versatile. They have different styles. They're not shot, and I believe that what we need to see, and because of the way that Maurice Hooker was able to utilize his jab at a distance last night, even though Virgil Ortiz was kind of walking through it, but I'd like to see Virgil Ortiz be able to kind of move his feet a little bit more, laterally, side to side, rather than come straight forward. Even though he does have underrated defense, I would just like to see him use angles a little bit more with his feet before he steps in there against one of the more experienced champions. Not that any of them hit harder than Virgil Ortiz does, and not that any are more intense than Virgil Ortiz Jr. is. They're just more experienced than Virgil Ortiz Jr.
I just Mikey Garcia name that pops up for me. I would love to see him take on Mikey for sure, but that fight I don't think is going to happen. No,
considering who's in Virgil's corner.
No, I know, but I mean, I'm just saying. I think that, yeah, I know that's a small little detail, but I just think that's the fight that I would like to see for both, because Garcia's a great fighter. I would like to see how Ortiz's pressure would affect him. But Lawrence Oakley knocked out Krzysztof Glowacki last night in England. I thought at the effectiveness of Glowacki in that fight. Krzysztof was a champion in that division. Only went into that fight with only 2 losses, was rated number 1 by the WBO. He was rated in the top 15 of the IBF. Was a 3-1 underdog. Lawrence Oakley was only rated in the WBO. I think it was the size that gave him all kinds of trouble. Glowacki, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean Oakley's a huge cruiserweight. I mean he's definitely a heavyweight size. He doesn't have really the heavyweight frame, but he's only 28, and nowadays the average heavyweight doesn't really fill out until about 32, 33. But he's 6'5". And yes, I believe that size definitely did play a major factor into it. I believe that if I'm not mistaken, that Oakley has been busier than Glowacki, and Glowacki he didn't look very good in his last outing against Marius Briedis. I think that only lasted a couple rounds. So.
And then the last,
and I'm not taking anything away from the win of Oakley. It was a great win. I just believe that there were a lot of factors going in there. I would like to see Oakley against. I'd like to see him against some of the guys like maybe Dorticos or something like that before he steps in and he fights for the undisputed belt.
Yeah, well, I think it's a long way off for that, to be honest, which I think, that's the problem with titles today. You and I have discussed that a million times. It's just too easy to get a belt. I don't know if he's ready for. We'll see. Who knows? But the other fight, I didn't even watch, and I was surprised it went as long as it did. Peter Beeve stopping Adam Deans in the 10th round. Deans wasn't anywhere to be found in the rankings until last week. He was all of a sudden rated in the IBF, I believe. What was your thoughts on that fight? I'm sure you watched it.
Well, it happened just as expected. My only surprise in that fight is, as you stated, that it went that long.
Yeah, and especially with a guy who's never won a fight without knocking his opponent out in Peter Beeve. But
in Peter Beeve, what I've noticed about him, in my opinion, is sometimes he has a tendency to fight down to his level of competition.
Yeah, no, you're right, and a lot of fighters do that.
Enrico Quelling, who is a good fighter, but he is not a great fighter. That he brought him 12 rounds, and I was actually thinking that we might see some sort of odd outcome on the cards in that fight. I was kind of worried that they were going to actually rob Beterbiev on that. And the Vodzik fight, that's where we actually got to see the best of Beterbiev, in my opinion, considering the talent level and skill level of Vodzik. So that's I really don't know what to make on that. And the light heavyweight division right now, we have the Joe Smith Jr. and Vlasov fight coming up in April. That's been postponed twice now, I believe. And I think once that fight happens, which I'm pretty sure that Joe Smith Jr. is going to win that, and I would fight between Joe Smith Jr. and Artur Beterbiev. Two big, strong light heavyweights who can punch like mules.
And don't forget Bivol. Dimitri Bivol is the odd man out all of a sudden.
Bivol's been MIA for quite some time.
Yeah, well, he's fighting. I think he's fighting in a couple of weeks. But anyway, lastly, I want to discuss the announcement that Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury have signed a 2-fight deal. It ain't official yet. I mean, they put their ink to the paper. Now they got a certain amount of time before the contract expires if they can't find a location. It was a 2-fight deal, according to multiple sources. They're looking for a location, site fees. It seems like it might be over in the Middle East because of the money that they're throwing around. The first fight, 50-50 purse split, which I love. Second fight, 60-40. I love the details of the contract, and I love the fight. The hype's already started. Tyson Fury saying he hasn't even been training. He's just drinking beer. I don't believe that. What do you think?
No, that's Tyson Fury's MO. Remember he did that with Klitschko. Remember coming out with his sticking straight out, and as if he had gained 100 pounds overnight, and that's just his shtick. Tyson Fury is a master of mind games, so no, I don't believe that Tyson Fury is out of shape at all.
So we've talked about this potential matchup forever. A lot of stuff has come out with Deontay Wilder. There's a lot of question marks about his sanity. The Mark Breland comments that were out several weeks back, where Breland said he could beat some of his victories, some of his wins on his resume. But the truth of the matter is, all kidding aside, Dax, I mean, we've been saying this about Deontay Wilder for a long time. I look at this now, and I bring up Deontay only for one reason. I look at the both performances that Tyson Fury had against Deontay Wilder, and I have to start to think, were these fantastic performances by Tyson Fury, or did he just face an opponent that we all knew was overrated? And does he take that type of fighter that we've seen against Wilder against Anthony Joshua? Anthony Joshua has shown a suspect chin, but aside from that, he's a solid fighter. I've always said that I thought that Anthony Joshua could beat Tyson Fury because I didn't think that Tyson Fury had the power to knock him out. He showed that he does have knockout power by knocking out Deontay, but Deontay, I've said all along, has a glass chin, but so does AJ. There's so many things to talk about with this fight. How do you see it going today? We may change our opinions next week, the week after, 2 weeks from now, but how do you see this fight going, assuming it takes place in June as planned?
One, just to hit off on the location and the timing of it, it's kind of, and due to nobody else's fault, just because of the times that are going on throughout the world with, COVID still, I would hate to see this fight happen in the Middle East. I would love for this fight to happen, at Wembley, where they're going to easily get 90,000 fans, or a big stadium in the U.S. But because it's two British fighters, the big money would be over in the U.K. and pay-per-view or the zone, wherever they decide to show it. Is how we're going to see that here. But I believe that Tyson Fury is the more versatile fighter than Anthony Joshua. Not that Anthony Joshua is not, an elite caliber boxer. It's just I believe, Tyson Fury. No, he's still not a one-punch knockout artist. That doesn't mean he doesn't have the ability. It's just Tyson Fury doesn't sit down on his punches. But Tyson Fury, he's so nimble on his feet. Anthony Joshua, he has stamina problems. Even in the Andy Ruiz Jr. rematch, it had to be fought at a certain, at a slower pace. Anthony Joshua, he's going to have to come down in weight, and for Anthony Joshua to come down in weight, he has to shed some of that muscle, and by him shedding some of that muscle, Tyson Fury, that is going to allow him to do what he did, kind of like he did against Deontay Wilder, add some extra weight, and he's going to still maintain that stamina and that extra weight and that extra height. He's going to be able to, wear Anthony Joshua down. I believe that, we could see that happen. I also believe that, Anthony Joshua, because he has a different type of power than Deontay Wilder. Even though he's a one-punch guy, his power is more of a thudding than Deontay Wilder is more like, a lightning type power where, it just happens so fast and so quick that, his opponent's body doesn't have time to react. Where Anthony Joshua, he's kind of, every punch, kind of leaves an impact, and then that last big punch does it. But Tyson Fury, as we've seen, has a solid amount of punch resistance. Getting knocked down and staying down are two different things. So I just think Tyson Fury has more in his overall repertoire between the footwork, between being able to fight at a distance and in close, and the mind games. I just believe that all those together is what's going to get under Anthony Joshua's skin, who can easily be rattled. And Anthony Joshua at times, and we've seen it, and I believe that's what caused the Andy Ruiz Jr. loss, is Anthony Joshua, much like Lennox Lewis, can be arrogant at times and not take an opponent seriously. And Tyson Fury, you have to take serious as cancer.
I think he's going to take Fury seriously. There's no doubt. I don't think you'll see a mental lapse like we saw with the first Ruiz fight. I also think that his boxing ability, Deontay Wilder doesn't have any boxing ability. He's got punch and power. It was. I think that's easier for Tyson Fury to defend against. I'm not so sure that he's going to be able to withstand it from Anthony Joshua, but we will see. I do agree with you that basically Tyson Fury's ring smarts far exceed Anthony Joshua's, only because, not that Anthony Joshua is not an intelligent guy. It's just that inside the ring, Tyson Fury is able to utilize every little piece of data that he can process, and he processes it quickly. I think that Anthony Joshua they have to formulate a game plan, and he'll stick to it. Once you have to go to another part of the game plan, that's when Anthony Joshua starts to fumble a little bit, where Tyson Fury exceeds. He excels when he can, make a change on the fly. So it's going to be interesting to see for sure.
Well, I would like, me personally, because this will be for whoever wins this one is going to be the heavyweight champion of the world. There is no other pieces scattered around, so that right there makes the fight more significant. But if the first fight is, a really good fight, no matter who wins, and then we can have a second fight, or, possibly even a trilogy, and, both guys are in their prime, and both guys with the popularity that they have, it could actually be a case of where this revitalizes boxing in terms of bringing in, the casual fan, and nothing still to this day, even for people who don't watch boxing, catches their attention like the word "the heavyweight championship."
100% agree with you, Dax. And I thought I was ready to cut you off, because I thought you were going to say another aspect of this. You're right. It will be for the heavyweight championship. How long will the sanctioning bodies let that happen before they toss in a mandatory to one of these, to the winner, where he gets stripped, and then you start the ball game again? I mean, I'm looking at I printed out these rankings yesterday, and you look at the WBC. Okay, Tyson Fury is the world heavyweight champ. Povetkin's the interim champ. IBF, they rate one world champion, as does the WBO. That's Anthony Joshua. And then go to the WBA. The WBA has the balls to list 4 people as world champions. Anthony Joshua is the super champion. Trevor Bryan, your guy, is the world champion. Helenas and Emmanuel Char both have pieces of it. I think that's embarrassing. If I'm the WBA, I have to show some form of embarrassment. But then again, they're doing it for the money.
Yeah, that was going to be my reply. Is people have to remember that sanctioning bodies make their money due to those fees that they tack on for their champions to defend the belt. And the bigger that the combined purses is, the better off the sanctioning body makes out. So I believe that because this is going to be huge in terms of financial dividends, so imagine what 3 times would bring in. This is assuming that no matter who wins, that the first fight is competitive, and then if the second fight, the opposite person should happen to win. Imagine what the third fight would bring in. So I think the sanctioning bodies would be stupid. They'd actually that would be bad business for them to throw in a mandatory, because you're not going to get 5 mandatories against either one of them. That's going to make the sanctioning body the amount in sanctioning fees that one Anthony Joshua Tyson Fury fight would bring in.
I agree, but sanctioning bodies don't do the smartest things a lot.
Well, this is true, but I mean, I'm trying to look into an ideal situation.
No, you're trying to figure out a common sense situation, and you're the fact that the sanctioning bodies don't display common sense at times. That's the little wild card in the mix. But
the WBA did last week. They did one good thing, and that's where they temporarily suspended the judge from the Roman Gonzalez and the
Juan Estrada
and the Juan Francisco Estrada fight.
Yeah, that fight. I'm glad you brought that up. That fight. I loved it. I I talked briefly about it off air with Alex the other day. I don't know how I feel about the fight. I think Juan Estrada is a bigger fighter. Chocolatito has had a pretty good career. He's taken a lot of shots. I thought he ran out of gas, Dax Gonzalez. I thought he ran out of gas. I thought his game plan should have been modified a little bit. I think the fight was a draw. I thought the fight was a draw. I wouldn't have been surprised if it. I know most people hate draws, but sometimes it's the right thing, and I thought it was in that case. It just seems like the powers that be, when they get Gonzalez in a close fight, they never go his way. I don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, there were times where I really believe that Estrada was using the wrong game plan. Because Estrada, in his last few fights, has shown to be a smarter fighter than what he was against Roman Gonzalez on that night. And I don't know if maybe, it was a little bit mental. There's been, what was that last fight? 8 years in the build-up, and, so maybe Estrada mentally felt like he had something to prove, and, the old saying, when you go and you seek a knockout is when it doesn't happen. And Estrada thinking to himself, well, I knocked out Kudras, who Gonzalez barely beat. I beat the man that literally, almost decapitated him. By now that we're up in weight, and I am the bigger fighter, I am the younger fighter, I am the guy that has less miles on me, I should be able to go out there and I should be able to put on a dominant performance and avenge my loss from back in, I think that was 2011 to 2012, and maybe he was a bit surprised that Gonzalez actually had as much in him as he did on that night. I was surprised, but I also believe that Roman Gonzalez, he's definitely hit his cap. Even if he had won this fight, he still hit his cap. He's never been a big puncher at 115 pounds. He does have a lot of mileage on him. The older he gets, any fighter gets, they're going to have to move up, especially how close those lower divisions are in terms of weight. And the next division up is one where would be a total disaster. If he moved up a division, he would, let's say, even if he took on Rigondeaux or Donaire, that would be a disaster. But imagine if he went in there against the monster, Onoye Inoue. So I think that maybe in a run BC3 fight would be a good way for Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez to end his career, because every fighter has one last performance in him, and I believe the one, his last performance against Estrada and the Fee fight, I think those were his last good performances at that level. If he was in a higher weight class, let's say 129 and above, throughout his whole career with his skill set, he'd be an all-time great, and people would talk about him for 100 years to come, because he was that good.
I agree with you. I think he has one fight left. I, too, would like to see the third fight with Estrada. It makes sense, but I think the smarter thing for him would be to try to go down in weight, because his punches, although he lands so many, they're just not as effective. I mean, credit to Estrada. I mean, Estrada was taking some bombs in the first half of that fight. I mean, I was surprised he didn't stun him or he drop him or anything. And I think that actually got Estrada moving forward for the second half of that fight, which ultimately won him the fight, because Chocolatito couldn't stop him. And I think the same thing would happen in a third fight. So I think the only way that Gonzalez can end his career on a positive note would be to try to go back down a weight class and see if he can't capture a title and then call it a day. But that's just
if he can go back down to 112, get a couple fights there, I definitely believe he can capture a belt there and then retire, because there are some very good young champions from over in Japan at that division too. So Chocolatito, as he, at that lower weight, we know they age a lot faster than bigger fighters, and Gonzalez has a lot of miles on him because of his earlier years and always that fan-friendly style. But as you get older, it's a lot harder to come down, and didn't exactly look I mean, he's never been, like an overly muscular, ripped fighter, but, he looked a little bit loose in that fight. And I don't know if you mentioned, with Juan Francisco Estrada, some of the shots that he was taking. At some point in time, and I had predicted before the fight, he's going to get knocked down, then he's going to come back, and then he's going to go into that second gear, which, kind of seems to be a trend. Is when he gets hurt or when he gets knocked down, he gets up and he just seems a lot better. So I don't know what happened with that, but I do believe that the fight was a whole lot closer than that one judge had it. I think it was 2 points either way. I would not have cared, and I think maybe a third fight would be great for Gonzalez, and then, as you stated, maybe drop down or then call it a day, because I think actually Estrada in another few fights he may move up, and I don't think that Rungvisai, if they fought 100 times, I think Rungvisai beats Gonzalez 98. Yeah, 97 rather. I'm sorry, he already beat him twice, but 97 out of 100.
There's certain fighters and their styles that you just can't overcome. I think Estrada is a bigger fighter. And I if I'm Gonzalez, if I go for the money and go for a third fight, either way, win, lose, or draw, that's it. I think he's got too many miles on him. I think he's taken some hellacious shots. Hellacious. I couldn't get that word.
Hellacious, yeah.
Yeah, I said hellacious.
That's the bad thing about them lower weight classes, because as good as they are and exciting as they are, they're not getting the money that they deserve for that type of excitement. No.
Dax, it was great being back on. We got to do it more regularly. I'm ready. So hopefully we'll be doing this again real soon.
Absolutely. Everybody enjoy your Sunday.
Well, we got a big fight coming up. I'm really looking forward to see the Povetkin rematch, which is
Povetkin versus White, yeah.
Yeah, Dillian White is next week, right?
Yeah, next week, and then just 60 more days is going to be Canelo versus Saunders.
Another big one. So, if anything, we'll be doing shows after the big fight. So, Dax, thanks for joining us. And, of course, keep up the good work on the website.
All right, everybody. Enjoy your day.
Take care. That's my man, Dax Khan. Give his thoughts on a bunch of stuff. On, obviously, the fights that took place yesterday, and Marvin Hagler, and of course, the Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury potential showdown that we're hoping to get real soon. So June is when they're calling it. So we'll see what happens with that. But in any event, yeah, it was. Talking about Gonzalez, Estrada, I've always been a big fan of, Gonzalez and Estrada, and it would be cool to see a third fight, but I am concerned about the well-being of Gonzalez. He's been in some wars. Hey, man, don't forget to order your very own copy of my book, Tom Molyneux, From Bondage to Baddest Man on the Planet, is available right now, where all good books are sold. You can get yourself a copy by going to Amazon.com or also, of course, BarnesandNoble.com. Or if you want a signed copy, just drop me an email, Billy@TalkinBoxing, TalkinBoxing.com. Joining us right now, the man, the myth, the legend himself. And speaking of the man, the myth, the legend himself, I heard from my man Sal. I talked to him recently. He's doing really well. We're going to try to get him on the show very soon, so everybody stay tuned for that. Sal wanted me to make sure that I told everyone thank you for the well wishes. And Sal told me he's beat cancer. So we'll see how that works out. He said his last test showed him 100% cancer-free. So talk about a miracle, man. Sal Rocky Senecola will get him on soon. Right now, the other man, myth, legend, Alex Papali. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, BC. Great to talk to you this morning.
Yeah, it seems like it's been, I don't know, probably 3 months. Oh, it has been like 3 months, But But anyway, first
that's great news about Sal, and I heard that our mutual friend Colleen Aycock is in remission from cancer as well. So that's cancer's 0-2 this week, which is nice to hear.
Well, that's good. I knew we would catch up to that beast sooner or later, so that's great news. Great news. I haven't spoken to Colleen in a little bit, but
me neither. I got to give her a call.
Yeah, well, I also heard that my man Austin Colleen is recovering very nicely from a stroke. So our word goes out to Austin as well.
I've noticed that I turned 50 in July, and my conversations now tend to be very much about prescriptions and colonoscopies and my chart. Things like that.
Yeah, regularity. Hey, is everything coming out okay? Yeah, it's good. Good. Hey, are you waking up in the middle of the night? Not as much anymore. Hey, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Notice these bumps here on Main Street. You ever heard anything like that?
No. Well, the other thing is you hear when somebody passes away, 90 years old. Oh, he was so young. He had his whole life in front of him.
Poor guy.
But but in all seriousness, Marvin Hagler did pass away pretty young, 66 years old. I know Marvin Hagler meant a lot to you. I mean, you have a full body tattoo of him, which incidentally looks outrageous, by the way. I was just bragging about the blood. The only time I ever saw Marvin Hagler bleed was in that fight, and you've captured it forever on yourself, on your, what do they call it? The what's the art? Canvas. Your canvas known as your body. What was your initial after the shock? Because when they announced that, when Michael Buffer said that, I mean, the shit went through me. I don't even think it really hit me until a couple of days later. I know it shook him up, and I know it shook you up. Tell us your initial thoughts on the passing of.
Yeah, it was a shock, and it was one of those things that it was a little weird for me, the timing, because I had some, like I said, like you had mentioned, I had some tattoo work done on Wednesday, and I had that planned for a while. It was going to be in December, and then I just, because of financially, I rescheduled it, and they have a big backlog because of COVID, and so we were all scheduled to do it last Wednesday, and on Saturday I jumped on Facebook at one point of times. I incessantly check it each day, and I saw the notice from Kay Hagler, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, no way. Please, let's hope somebody, that somebody hacked her account or something. But no, within about 40 minutes, it was being repeated in other places, and yeah, it's sad, and I think that, and then of course came a little bit of the controversy that, comes with everything these days. He's 66 years old. I mean, I don't know what kind of health he was in.
He looked good. He looked good, right?
Absolutely. He looked very good. And he would come, that was the other thing that really was tough. And I think everybody's in this same situation because of the pandemic. Because the Hall of Fame, the Hall of Fame was a chance to see him every year. And because he was a regular there. And because it was canceled because of COVID, didn't have that annual dose of the Marvelous One, which I know I need. Just to see him there, is great. And I think that's the other thing about it, is that as much as maybe he did not get the accolades that he deserved, or they were late in coming in his career, the Hall of Fame, I mean, it's pretty obvious who the star is, and it's Marvin Hagler. I mean, the one who people go nuts for and chase around every single year is Marvelous Marvin Hagler. I mean, granted, whoever's the inductee of the year is always the popular person, or more, the that class, but Marvin Hagler is the one who's consistently, the one that everybody's after. And yeah, he was, it's sad because he's, that era of the Four Kings, and there will never be another era like that. He's part of the greatest single round probably in boxing history. I mean, you could maybe argue there's a couple of others that would be up there, but I mean, for an all-out war, there's no jabs thrown in that round. It's crazy. And that's to me, in a way, that fight, sort of, that first round is a perfect example of why every single movie fight is just BS. Because when you have two guys that are amazing and really good fighters and trying to hit each other, a fight is never, well, you go first and then I'll go. And movie fights are always like that. If you watch Hagler Hearns, those guys are winging their best shots at the same time the other guy is. And it's like whoever gets there first gets there. And no movie fight, no choreography for a movie really ever captures that. That's why boxing, it's, to me, every single movie of boxing just pales in comparison.
Not only that, but it makes boxing the sport you must see live, because you can't, even watching it on TV, you can't get it all unless you're there. Even if you're in the nosebleed seats, you feel it. It's there, and there's no other sport like it. Listen, those are the best 3 rounds of boxing I ever witnessed live. There's no question about it. The only fight that I can think of that comes close to it happened to have been 10 rounds like that, and that was Gene Fulmer against Benny Kid Paret. Sal and I rebroadcast that fight, and I had never seen it before, and we were both just in awe of the amount of action, and many people believe that if the medical rules were in place then, that like they are now, Benny Kid Paret may have lived, because that was the fight that most experts agree did damage that would subsequently Kid Paret when he stepped in the ring in his next fight against what was the fighter? You see, you talk about age, but when he died in the ring.
Emil Griffith.
That's the name. And thanks for nudging me with that, because I was like, oh, damn, I know the book, the most common, I can knock a man out in the ring and everyone loves me. I love a man and everyone hates me type of a comment. I'm paraphrasing. But energy-packed fight for sure. But Hagler, we were looking at, Dax and I were looking at his last 3 fights, which were all about a year apart. The Tommy Hearns fight, then John the Beast Mugabe, and then, of course, the Sugar Ray Leonard fight, which we were reminiscing about the time we were up at the Hall of Fame, and you were part of that as well. And you were one of the ones that was shocked at your own scorecard. We watched that fight with no sound. We all discussed every round afterwards. I've had that fight consistently a draw all these years, and I still honestly believe that it should have been a draw. But the way the fight was fought, and we, analyze it and dissect it today, Marvin Hagler kind of gave that fight away by not fighting the way he fought in those previous 2 fights that I mentioned, Tommy Hearns and the Beast Mugabe, where he just comes right at you. He fights the way he fought Tommy Hearns against Sugar Ray Leonard. Leonard doesn't get out of that fight on his feet, Alex.
Yeah, it's possible, and I think that's the thing about it that is tough. I mean, for me especially, it wasn't until that night that we all watched it together that I gave Sugar Ray Leonard the credit that I felt he deserved for a lot of those combinations, the flurries, because I think for years I watched that fight through the eyes of a Hagler fan. And I think that I bought into that idea that those, of what he said at the end, those flurries meant nothing. There were times where they were landing on the gloves, but no, there's other times where they certainly counted. And I think Marvin wouldn't have sort of backed off the way he did, like you said. He wasn't as relentless again in going after Sugar Ray like he was against Mugabe or against Hearns. However, Leonard is brilliant, and I do think that I totally disagree with what Max said. I think Leonard's the better fighter. He's not the one I like better, but yeah, he's a little bit better because, I mean, I don't think that's a difficult decision to make or conclusion to reach because, I mean, Bill, you know this. We're talking about little increments. These guys are great. And I mean, Tommy Hearns and Hagler is a perfect example. That fight, if they fought again, maybe we don't get the same result. Because think about what happened. Tommy Hearns broke his fist in that first exchange on Hagler's head. And that was like the most hurt he's ever been in that first round. And I think that if that doesn't happen, maybe the fight is different because now you're dealing. The other thing that makes that fight why it's so great is that those were arguably the two best fighters on earth at the time. So when you have an all-out barroom brawl, no jabs, no feeling out between the two best guys in the world, how could that not be the pinnacle? So I think that's one of the other reasons. This wasn't Gotti Ward, where you get a great slugfest against guys who, you know, are you know, talented, but not the best on earth. This was the two best fighters on earth at the time. That's amazing, and for them to, I don't know. So that's I guess this is the long answer here is that the thing that separates great fighters is sometimes very, very little, and a lot of it has to do with chance. And just rising to the occasion in the moment. And I think that's the thing about that sort of nebulous quality of greatness. Sugar Ray Leonard was the one that could always do that. Marvin Hagler, you know, and I mean, he almost always did it. The only time he didn't was against Sugar Ray Leonard. And maybe in the first Antiformo fight. And the only thing with that is that he tired a little. And then, you know, it came down to where it's not up to, you know, his fists to make the decision of the fight. It's up to three people at ringside. So, but again, I don't know. We live in a time where people are so looking for binary things and explanations, and that was not the only thing that I heard from Max. The other thing, I saw him tweet that Marvelous Marvin Hagler was Mike Tyson before Mike Tyson. No, he was nothing like Mike Tyson. I don't know where that comes from. I don't know what argument what comparison you're trying to make. There was nothing about Marvelous Marvin Hagler. It was Mike Tyson.
Be careful. Don't talk about Max. You might get censored and your account might get deleted. So, but you know, you make some great points, and I feel bad for the fans today. I feel bad for the sport. Obviously, it's keeping me away from doing the show. But the two best, you know, that statement you made is such a strong one, and I agree with it 100%. You know, when you have the two best in a division, and they go at it, and we were treated with a great fight, be it as it may, it only lasted 3 rounds. You know, Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather could have given us that, and we waited a decade, close to a decade, and we got a tease. It was a joke, you know. But back in those days and prior, that's what you got. You got to the top, and you fought the next top guy. Not only did the money come, it did. Today, it's all about the money. The glory, they don't really care about. They bullshit everybody, and it's the way it is. The other interesting thing you mentioned about that fight was something that I blame today on a lot of younger people. They never hold themselves accountable. You know, I use this example all the time. You know, no, you hit the deer. You know, like right. I was driving along, and this deer ran out and hit me. You know, no, you hit the deer. You know, it might have come at the last minute or whatever, but take accountability for yourself. You hit the deer. The deer wasn't driving, and the deer wasn't aiming for you. Okay, I'm going to hear stories. Oh, a deer ran right beside the side of my car. Yeah, I know. It happened to me once too. But a lot of younger people don't take. There's always a reason. And in boxing, it's so magnified. There's always an excuse. I didn't train right. My trainer, I'm firing him. He didn't tell me. Oh, that steroid that's in my system. I don't know. They gave me. I don't know how it got in there. It wasn't me. It was him. It was him. We are going to do this. We're going to do that. He didn't do this in the ring. Nobody holds themselves accountable anymore. In that fight, Tommy Hearns breaks his hands, his one hand, his power hand. Never said a word about it. Never said a word about it in the post-fight. Never said a word about it for years. I think it was 7 years before he brought that up. And, to me, Tommy Hearns gave Marvin Hagler the credit that he deserved and let him bask in the sunlight after that fight. He didn't try to put a blemish on the fight. He didn't complain that he had a hard time making weight or that the ring wasn't in his favor or the judges were going to rob him or anything. No excuse. He said basically Hagler was the better man. And we don't see that today. It's something that is gone. And I can't see it happening again. Even when people are giving their opponent credit, there's a but. I want to give him credit. He was a better man tonight. But I had this heavy suit on and it drained my energy. He's a real good fighter. He really hurt me. But my corner should have never stopped the fight. You know what I mean? I mean, it's always something. And it pushes me away from the sport. But Marvin Hagler. There's
a lot of conditional accountability. And I think that you're right. I mean, that's what's unbelievable. I don't think it was until that HBO documentary where and that was the other thing too, is that I think was revealed in the HBO documentary is not only was the broken hand, but that deep muscle massage on his legs. And Hagler, you could see Hagler knew, I've got to take this guy's legs away from him, because when he starts that first round, the first thing he does is he's zeroing in on the body. He throws these big body shots at Hearns because he knows if I'm gonna win this fight, I can't let him move on me. And that's the other thing too, in terms of movement, that I think is very important about understanding Marvin Hagler is marvelous Marvin Hagler. Excuse me. Is that and I remember this in the pre-fight. HBO did all that pre-fight stuff before the Hagler Leonard, and one of my favorite writers at the time was Mike Katz, and I remember him talking about how Vito Antuofermo was one of the guys who may have sort of ruined a generation of middleweights by rushing Marvin Hagler, pressing him. That's what Marvin wants. And at one point in his career, Marvin even said he would love to get a chance to fight Harry Greb, because he thinks he would do well against Greb, because Greb came forward. If you come forward on Marvin, that's where he ruins you. It's when he comes forward, he has that's where he's nothing like Mike Tyson. Because Mike Tyson, that's all he did. Watch the Alan Minter fight. Minter gets hemmed up, and then the fans treat. You think Meghan Markle got treated bad in England? Look at the way the fans treat Marvelous Marvin after he beats up Alan Minter. And look at that fight. Minter came forward. Well, you come forward on Hagler, forget it. And that's the thing about him, is that Ray Leonard made Marvin come forward, and he had trouble with that because. He wasn't. He was more a counter-punching boxer puncher. He was not an aggressive, intimidating, pressure guy like Mike Tyson. He was a hard puncher, but he was not an explosive puncher. So there's a big, big difference between the two of them.
Listen, I like Max personally. I've met him a few times. I've chatted with him. As far as boxing knowledge. He knows the sport. There's no question about it. But his opinions have been swayed by corporate directors. He did it with HBO. I was always clamoring to really hear his opinion. And now it just seems that he doesn't have an opinion anymore. He goes with whatever somebody's telling him to say, even though he's not associated with the same outlets as he was now. But to make that statement, It's hard. I think that Sugar Ray, I guess I might lean towards your opinion between those, but I think Sugar Ray might have accomplished more because he challenged himself. Not that Marvin didn't. Marvin, I give credit for staying in his division and staying the course, so to speak. But I can honestly say that I can't tell you who I think is a better fighter. I think different fighters, even though they did happen to fight. I would say the same thing. I lean towards Manny Pacquiao being a better fighter than Floyd Mayweather because of the excitement factor, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, when you look at it, the way I am with Hagler and Hearns, I would have to say the same for those two. How could you say one is better than the other where one accomplished more than the other in terms of, level of opposition, et cetera, and then the other guy didn't lose, and, so there's certain fighters that you can't make that statement for, and I think that Hagler and Leonard are one of them. And the point you made about Hagler fighting Leonard, he definitely fought Leonard's fight coming after. Remember, he clowned a little. He was doing with the glove in the air after the rounds. I mean, he wasn't sure of himself, despite some of the things that he said. And we all had those discussions when we watched that fight. He wasn't being himself. And, he was almost doubting himself during the fight. And, switching to orthodox was a mistake. He just did not do what Marvelous Marvin Hagler had done in arguably the biggest fight of his career to that point. And then we lost him. He got so pissed off. Not only did we never see a rematch, but we lost the man from the sport, with the exception of his time that he would spend in the Hall of Fame. One of the things that surprised me, Alex, was where he passed away, in New Hampshire. I didn't know that he was back living in the States. I had thought that he was still living a superstar life in Italy, actually.
Yeah, I guess he had two homes. He had a home in, I think it was Bartlett, New Hampshire, and Milan, Italy. And, he was here in New Hampshire where he passed. I think that's the thing about him, that him and Sugar Leonard are very different. And even with Tommy Hearns and Duran, the thing that makes Marvin stand out, of course, is that Marvin is a middleweight. He lived a middleweight, died a middleweight. That was it. He never fought at welter. He never moved up to light heavy. One of the things, and again, not to just keep harping on the Mike Tyson comparison, but the other thing that was amazing about Marvelous Marvin Hagler is don't beat him. Because if you beat him, he's going to get you in a rematch. And not only that, he'll get you better. Because look at the Sugar Ray Seals. Sugar Ray Seals and Bobby Boogaloo Watts are two examples. The first time he fought Sugar Ray Seals, it's a close fight. The second time, it's also close, but most people thought Hagler deserved the decision. So Hagler fought him a third time, knocked him out. 1 round. Same thing with Bobby Boogaloo Watts. Watts beats him, then Hagler fights him again. Hagler wins. Hagler fights him a third time, knocks him out in 2 rounds. I mean, that's the thing about him, is that he, in terms of even how he started boxing, the first time he went to the gym, the Petronellis didn't think too much about him. But then the next day, he came back, and they were like, wow, what's going on? He was like, I went home and I practiced. That's the kind of guy Marvelous Marvin Hagler was. He was the kind of guy that was consistently trying to do better. There's a great interview with Johnny Carson before the Ray Leonard fight, and I love it because Hagler comes out in a tracksuit. And Johnny Carson, I mean, in terms of power in Hollywood, I don't know. I mean, I don't know too much about him, but I wouldn't be surprised to find out in terms that Johnny Carson had people killed. That's how powerful he was in Hollywood. And the thing that's great in the interview is Marvin Hagler refers to him as John a couple times. And then at one point he's talking about he loves isolation. He puts himself in jail. And that's the way he looked at it. And think about that. The training process of fighter. It's a process of breaking down, and then snapping back just enough to be ready on fight night. That's the way Marvin always looked. I think the only night you could argue maybe he didn't, and some of it was age, was against Sugar Ray Leonard. But part of that, Ray Leonard knew it, because Ray Leonard did the pay-per-view with Barry Tompkins for HBO, and Tompkins drove him home that night after the Mugabe fight, and Ray Leonard said, I could beat this Marvin. And he told him exactly how he could beat him, just fighting the last 30 seconds of every round. And it's what Ray Leonard did. So I think that's the other thing. Had they met maybe 2 years before, that's a different fight.
Of course.
So I think that's part of what makes Ray so great, is Ray knew what he could do.
The impact that fight had on the sport is unbelievable. Not only are we still talking about it today, you could still get people jacked up, and the whole basis of this show, my show right here, was doesn't take place as much anymore, but the whole basis of this show, when Jeremy and I were thinking about doing this 17, 18 years ago now, was, I wanted a show. I said, I would love to have a show if there were two guys sitting at a bar having a drink and they start talking about boxing and how it goes from one topic to another, all within the sport. And you can make the argument that fight changed it. Because, to this day, if you started talking about that fight, you're going to hear very opinionated thoughts of who won the fight and how and what transpired, etc. But the deep changes it made in the sport, Dax and I were talking about it earlier. I talked about it with Augie yesterday. The unwritten rule in boxing, where you have to knock the champion out to win the title, or beat the shit out of him, really, went out the window that night. And it subsequently has continued to go out the window to this day. How many times do we watch a champion that walks into a ring, he fights a guy in an extremely close fight and loses the belt? It never used to happen. You used to have to beat the champion decisively, knock him out basically, or at least beat him up bad. This changed it. The stealing of the last part of the round was never done before that. A lot of trainers or fighters saw that Sugar Ray did it. And, how many times have we had my friend Larry Hazard say, no, you got to break the round down in 3 sections. That's how he does it. First minute, second minute, third minute, and then you get your winner. You can't watch a round and score it based on what you're seeing most recently. And that's exactly what happened with the judges in that fight, because Sugar Ray came on strong in the last 30 seconds. You could make an argument to say whether Hagler actually won the prior time in the fight. There were rounds where he did, and there were certainly rounds where he didn't. But at the end of the day, that fight changed the sport. We lost Marvin on it, and it changed the sport forever. And it's weird because of the history that Marvin had throughout his career and what led him to that fight, and then that particular fight, to have that be the end, for me, Alex, it will forever leave a void, because what would have happened? Should he have fought? Would he have followed what you just said? Nobody's successful fighting him again. Would he have gotten up for it? Was his mind so screwed up from losing that fight? Would he have never been the same? Was his career basically over after the Mugabe fight, like Ray Leonard said? So many questions that we'll never have an answer to. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Mugabe fight is phenomenal. And that was one of the things that was also, for me, strange about his passing was somebody had tweeted a clip from the Mugabe fight that was just amazing, where Hagler gets ripped with an uppercut that would have taken a lot of people's heads right off. And he just sort of eats it and says, yeah, come on, and keeps coming. And I just was amazed at the chin on him. Because think about that. That guy,
Mugabe was the most dangerous he was the number one contender in every division. He was 26-0 with 26 goes.
But he was a junior middleweight.
And he was moving up,
right.
But he was a big junior middleweight.
Yeah.
He was taller than Marvin. And it's a firefight. It's a thriller. I think that like you said, I think that the Leonard fight, in a way, it definitely changed the sport, because that was the first time that a long-term, established, great, all-time great champion lost on such a close split decision. And the other thing about it that was sort of, this, we come up with this every year. It's for me, and I think for a lot of people, it is perhaps the number one top three resentment fights of all time. The one that everybody's got an opinion about it, and if you talk about it, people's voices get raised.
I know.
They get upset about it.
I know.
The other one being Meldrick Taylor and Julio Cesar Chavez. I think those are the two big resentment fights in terms of modern history.
But that fight is kind of, you got to remind people about that one. The Sugar Ray Hagler fight always comes up. I mean, you start talking about boxing, and somehow that's like 6 degrees of separation from the sport of boxing. Hagler Leonard fight comes into the conversation. But I want to admit something to you, and I hope you don't hate me after this. But after the Tommy Hearns fight, I thought, because I witnessed Hagler get rocked and actually proved that he does indeed have blood inside his veins, because it was the first time it ever leaked out of him, as you have portrayed on your personal canvas. I thought Mugabe was going to beat him. When people were talking to me back in 1986, I said, I have a feeling the Beast is going to beat him. And throughout that fight, it looked like it might be a possibility, until Hagler, became Hagler and just wore him down. And like you said earlier, I mean, this is a guy that just was relentless. He never seemed to tire. He didn't seem human. The only time he seemed human was in the Ray Leonard fight. And he seemed human because he wasn't himself. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the other thing that unfortunately has happened, is not only did we've seen great champions, established champions now can lose on split decisions, because we saw it with the two Jermaine Taylor Bernard Hopkins fights. That's right in the same division. Is one of the things that I think was sort of, at least I couldn't help but really be disappointed last night. I don't know if you saw, they interviewed Terence Crawford. And of all the active fighters today, maybe Chocolatito is the other one who is reminiscent of Marvelous Marvin Hagler. But in terms of American boxer, in terms of the meanness, the toughness, the ability to switch back and forth from southpaw to orthodox, Terence Crawford is the guy that reminds me of Hagler. Not last night, when he said that Errol Spence, that he's not even thinking about that fight anymore. That was grotesque. I don't get it. What's going on in the welterweight division? I'm sorry. If that's one thing that, as much as people are talking about, we are in a great welterweight era. No, not if they don't fight each other. Yeah, it's a joke of an era if they don't fight each other. That's where the difference between the four kings. Yeah. So I don't know. And the idea that they're going to feed Virgil Ortiz to Errol Spence, he's not ready yet. That Maurice Hooker gave him a hard time. Look at his face. No, he's landing like crazy. Errol Spence will land all over him.
Terence Crawford, I think what you're getting is frustration out of him. Because Terence Crawford, listen, you're 100% correct. That's the fight that should be made. But because today's sport of boxing tries to milk the fan for every nickel they can, especially today where you can't even have live audience, it's what's turned me off on the sport. It's why we should actually just do Blast from the Past from forever, because there's plenty of fighters that we can discuss and educate the people who care to be educated. When you hear these guys that are doing shows now talk the way they talk, it's like the networks. They're associated with one group, and those fighters are it. Canelo, is proven to me that he does fight anybody. But how many people are available to fight him? He's separated himself. Manny Pacquiao, do we really want to keep seeing Manny Pacquiao fight? It's time and quite honestly, Terence Crawford is no spring chicken. And that's what Errol Spencer's waiting for, him to get a little older. They're all copycats. Let's talk about this. A heavyweight fight. It's could be the most substantial heavyweight fight in years. We're talking about Anthony Joshua against Tyson Fury. Tentatively, the fight, both fighters signed a 2-fight deal. First one taking place in June. Second one supposedly taking place at the end of this year. Both fights, according to both promoters, are going to take place this year. I like the way it's laid out so far. We don't have a location. We don't have a date yet, which really sets a flag up for me, Alex. But
yes.
50-50 split in the first fight, 60-40 split in the second. It sounds like that's the way the contract should be. And that's what makes me nervous, because nobody's fighting over the contract. Nobody's demanding more. And for Tyson Fury to come out and say, I'm not even training, I'm drinking beer. Well, that's Tyson Fury, 100%. You really believe he's not training for this fight? And then Eddie Hearn saying, well, AJ has been working hard nonstop since his last fight, preparing for this fight. Okay, so that's telling me he's going to be overtrained for this fight. We already got excuses being, Tyson Fury's already got, I didn't take this fight serious excuse, and AJ's already got, I trained too hard for this fight excuse. They've already embedded the excuses, and they haven't even gotten a location yet. What's your thoughts on this fight? We've talked about this fight many, many times. I still maintain my thought on this. I think AJ wins this fight. I know you have always said you thought Tyson Fury does. I just think that Deontay Wilder has proven to be exactly what we've said he was. Now he might not even have the mental capacity to fight anymore. The interview I saw with Mark Breland, coming clean, which he was quiet all those years, coming clean, that he didn't train, that he doesn't listen, all these things we assumed. Then for him to finally admit that he could beat most of the people on Deontay Wilder's resume right now, I believe that. So how much credit do we give Tyson Fury for beating Wilder twice? Because in all intent and purposes, I feel he beat him twice. And does he have the power? The fight between Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder was more intriguing for me only because Deontay had the power to knock out Anthony Joshua. Tyson Fury had the power to knock out Deontay Wilder, but does he have the power to knock out Anthony Joshua, a guy that's more refined in boxing, a much more accurate puncher? Defensively, Fury might be able to be ready for the onslaught easier than he would have been for Deontay, because Deontay is so unorthodox the way he throws punches. But I'm still leaning towards AJ, man. What do you think?
I think right now the layoff. Oh, am I picking up?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, cool. The layoff for Tyson Fury is definitely something that concerns me. And if that's true about the beer, which I highly doubt, however, we know that layoffs are not good for any fighters, and especially for him, because he had a history of self-abuse during layoffs. Now, I think he's in a really good position now, and I think, like you said, like you and Dax both said, that it's very likely that's just pre-fight hype for Instagram and stuff. I am very glad this fight is going to happen. I'm a little hesitant. Like you said, I think the reason why the deal sounds so agreeable is because it's not that tangible. If there was a site and a I think if the fight was already set, like we're going to have it in Wembley, I think maybe then there'd be in a date. Then they'd know, okay, well now it really is going to happen. Let's argue. I think it's a lot easier to agree on 50-50 and 60-40 when there's no site and there's no date. But I do think it will happen. I'm very encouraged that people have stopped talking about the Deontay Wilder rubber match because I don't think there's anything useful in that.
Wait a minute. You got to stop. I already got somebody commenting that we're hating now because we said something negative about Deontay. It makes me sick because we're not hating on anybody. We're calling a spade a spade. Should I have not said that? Uh-oh. But the truth of the matter is how are we hating anybody? We're reiterating a story that his own former trainer said, and Deontay Wilder did not have the talent. I mean, come on. If there's people that think that he has than punching power, they don't know the sport of boxing. And all I'm saying is I think that AJ will get the better end of Tyson Fury. I know you feel Fury will win. And from what I understand, they've already signed the contract tentatively. I think there's a 30-day. I'm pretty sure I read that there's a 30-day expiration if they don't find a suitable site. According to Eddie Hearn, there were already people bidding on it. They already had a $40 million site fee bid on the fight. So I'm confident that it's going to be. They are going to have a date and location. I'm not so confident the fight's going to come off, though, Alex.
Yeah, I really hope that it will happen in Wembley because that idea that it happens, in Saudi Arabia or in China just because, they could pack an arena, I think that would be disappointing. I mean, these are the two best fighters from the UK. That's where they should fight. And I think that's the thing about it is that that's part of why, as much as I want them to fight, and I think that they now is better than waiting because we've just been waiting so long for all these marinating fights. I do think that I want that Wembley to be packed. So what's the vaccination situation like in the UK? Because if you have it at Wembley, but you can only put 30,000 people in there, well, that kind of sucks. If you could fill it, that would be awesome. That's what it should be like. All those fans singing Sweet Caroline, that's what I want to see again. But if we're not at a point where we could do that safely, then, let's wait. So I don't know. It sucks because time is the enemy of every single fighter, and yet that's kind of, especially now where it feels like we're right on the precipice of sort of putting this thing away. It would be great to see a packed arena, but so I don't know. I mean, from what it sounds like, maybe November would be more likely than June or July, but I don't know what the situation is in the UK in terms of vaccination.
Well, the fights I watched yesterday from the UK were empty, no people.
Yeah. And I think the Beterbiev card that seemed to have a crowd, but some masked. And then I think the Glowacki fight, there was some crowd there, but I don't know. Yeah, it's so we're coming out. I don't know. And that's been one of the issues from the beginning about this, especially when you talk about the very pinnacle of the sport. Part of how these guys get paid is from the gate. Well, if you can't have the amount of people come in that usually do because there's an infectious disease going around, well, then that's going to affect their paycheck. And
yeah, but not when somebody forks out 40, 50, 60 million to have it at their venue. Then all of a sudden it's like, the fans can watch on TV. We're fine with that.
See, that's the part that I would like to see, because this should be an event.
I agree with you, and I agree that it should be in the UK. I agree with that 100%. Let's be real. The UK is where it's at in the sport of boxing. When you get to the brass tacks of the sport, yes, they all want to come to the U.S. because the U.S. Generates the coin. But England has true fighters. They have guys that are are just tough guys. I mean, the undercard was an indication of that yesterday on the Oakley fight. It's just, to me, to tell you the truth, Alex, and I've said this for years, if I ever had the opportunity to do this show from England way back in the beginning, I think it would have went in a different direction for sure, because I just think that our show that we all do here matches England better than it does the United States. I think that they're more knowledgeable of the sport, more appreciative of the sport, from both a current and historical perspective, unlike the majority of the younger U.S. fans. The older fans, which are obviously dying off, I can't say that for them. But the younger fans, for sure, it's what's hot now. It's why UFC and all of MMA is so popular. It's shorter. They don't have to pay attention. There's no a game plan that develops after 6 or 7 rounds before you go to phase 2. It's a different clientele, and I think boxing modern boxing originated in England, and let me tell you, it carries the sport on their back, and I mean that. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that's I don't know. I love boxing, and I love the Larry Merchant quote that you can't save boxing and you can't kill it, and no, you can't. It's the other way around. You can't kill boxing and you can't save it. And I always like that because that sounds very much like Dracula, and I love Dracula. And I think that even if you think about what happened on Saturday when we lost this great champion, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, had Marvelous woken up that morning, he would have watched the Chocolatito Estrada fight. He would have been very excited to watch that because he loved the sport. And what would he gotten to see? A spectacular fight that ended on a razor-thin decision where the all-time great, a lot of people thought got the short end of the stick. So in a way, if you think, what more fitting thing for Marvelous Marvin Hagler? Because, I mean, and if you look at Chocolatito's record, I think that he had 53 fights. We don't see that, at least in terms of, like you and Dax were talking about, we're not going to see, at least in American boxing, it's very unlikely we will see another Marvelous Marvin Hagler. If there is, he won't be from America. I think, Chocolatito is a good example because he's paid his dues, and that's the kind of guy Marvin Hagler was a champion who paid his dues, and kept coming back, repeatedly, even when you think that maybe, his days are, best days are behind him. The other thing that I think last night, we had seen her sort of break out into the scene when she upset Marlon Esparza. That Sinise Estrada, I don't know if you watched that fight last night, but she really hemmed up Annabelle Ortiz and won the women's minimum weight title, and that was just really a fun fight to watch because she was just not going to be denied by any means.
The fighters today find the weakest way to a title. They talk crap. No, let me rephrase that. They talk shit. They say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to fight this one, I'm going to fight that, and they don't. Just like you got disgusted with what's his name yesterday? I'm batting 1,000 with my memory. See what age does here with Terence Crawford. Now, I think Terence Crawford, I come to Terence Crawford's defense all the time when I hear people say, oh, he never fought anybody. What are you talking about? He was the B-side, and then all of a sudden they realized how talented he was. I like his mindset. Keith Thurman is another one that I think is overrated. Keith Thurman is an overrated fighter, not Terence. Exactly, and he's still in the mix. He's still ranked, But you look at the fights yesterday. Virgil Ortiz against Maurice Hooker. Okay, that was an exciting fight. Virgil Ortiz, young, up-and-coming fighter, 147-pounder. Maurice Hooker, not old by any stretch of the imagination, but he had to move up in weight. He was a junior welterweight, okay? Lawrence Oakley fights a guy that was a former world champion in Krzysztof Glowacki. I can never pronounce those names because sometimes it sounds like there's letters that aren't in there. I always thought it was Glowacki, but it's Golaski. But in any event,
yes.
There's no S, I know. But he was ranked, Krzysztof, let's just call him Krzysztof. He was ranked number 1 in the WBO, which was, the fight was for the vacant title, and number 13 in the IBF. Oakley was only rated in the WBO at number 2. That fight was for a title. When you look at Artur Beterbiev, he's a champion in both the WBC and IBF. Miraculously, in the past week, now I checked the rankings, Adam Deans was not even rated. All of a sudden, he mysteriously appears in the IBF's ratings. So I mean, you're not seeing. This is going back to what you said earlier. You're not seeing the best fight the best, but yet they pound their chest like they did. And until that happens, and I understand the reasons why. They're trying to marinate, if you want to steal a word from Bob Arum, make as much money as they can. They deserve to make as much money as they can. I'm not suggesting otherwise. I'm not. I believe that all fighters should make as much as they can. But just like we talked about Tommy Hearns against Marvin Hagler, the two best fighting each other, did Tommy Hearns ruin his chance of making money after losing that fight? Absolutely not. Sometimes in defeat, fighters' value goes up. And that's where the risk factor. No, everybody wants to make the most money with no risk. Well, I can understand that from a health perspective. But, everything that makes money requires a risk. Are you going to invest money in that stock that, you're going to roll the dice and gamble with? Well, if you hit it right, you're going to make out well. If not, you're living in a refrigerator box, But, I mean, the risk is what makes the reward so much greater. And the sport of boxing, all sports for that matter, it doesn't happen anymore. Everyone gets a trophy. Even pro sports, you're getting accolades for trying hard. No. What happened to the only thing that matters in professional sports is winning. Al Davis said it best. Just win, baby. I don't care how you win. Just win. And that's what professional sports is all about. You're getting paid to do it. I don't want to sound, old-fashioned, but I guess I am. And for people that are still paying to watch, mediocrity, it's ridiculous. How can we really say that Beterbiev Dean's fight was a world championship fight last night? I mean, come on. It was a stay busy fight. All fighters throughout the history of boxing had stay busy fights. I mean, I'm not going to criticize for that, but let's be real. Let's just call it the way it is. Ortiz, a young fighter fighting Maurice Hooker. It was a great fight. Okay, I'll give him that. I'll tell you the fighter that I feel sorry for is Chop Chop Corley. Fighting in a bare knuckle fighting championship, gets beat to Reggie Barnett beat the snot out of him before he threw his towel in. 46 years old. How bad has the sport been to him where he's still fighting at 46 years old? I don't know, man. It is disheartening. But the Chocolito fight, you and I talked about it a little bit the other day. I thought the fight could have been a draw. I think Juan Estrada's big. I hate to see Gonzalez go out like this. I do think the third fight would be lucrative financially for Gonzalez. But, does he want to have conversations with his grandkids someday? Does he want to have grandkids someday? Maybe he should consider going down and weight and fighting one of those champions. I'm sure he could get a shot.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about that was, and I'm a little surprised too, because we know, boxing it is what it is. It's pretty corrupt, and I think that it's very rare you see any sort of accountability. So it's strange that the WBA punished that one judge, especially in a fight that I did not think that was such an egregious decision.
The scorecard was only, those rounds were tough to score because some of the punches that Estrada was landing were very hard. So, they're making it seem like they're doing something because the media made it seem like that, because the fans made it seem like, and when push comes to shove, it was 2 rounds that particular judge thought went the other rounds were close enough, Alex.
I agree with you, and I think that's the thing about it. That I feel for Chocolatito, because had there not been as much of a gap between the last fight, I think that he probably would have won more convincingly, or he should have won. And I think that's sort of, but that's like we're talking about with the Four Kings. Sometimes the thing that differentiates these great fighters is just an issue of timing. And I think that, that's not, you can't take it, as much as I don't want to make it sound like getting judges right isn't worth this. However, I also don't think that punishing a judge is a way to make everything all better. I'm not sure that was the right move in this case. I don't think that scorecard was particularly egregious. It's not like Jojo Guerra in Hagler Leonard. Come on. That was Estrada Chocolatito was an extraordinarily close fight. There was at least 3 rounds that could have gone either way. So yeah, I don't know. That's the thing about this sport is, as much as I love it in spite of itself a lot of times. It's a beautiful sickness, as they say.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Well, listen, I appreciate you joining us. It's obviously something that it's back. Whatever was missing for me, it's back. So we will be doing more shows. I don't know if we'll be doing them every week, but we will be doing them more often. One thing I want to ask you before we go, Marvin Hagler, one final thought on him. We all agree, you, myself, and Dax all agree that he's a all-time great middleweight and would have been successful in any era, which to me is the definition of being an all-time great. You can't say that about a lot of fighters of today. Even Dax mentioned Triple G. I'm not so sure he would be that great in any era. I know he's great in this era, but I'm not so sure in any era. But Marvin Hagler definitely. But there's 2 fighters I'm curious to know your thoughts of how he would have fared, and both kind of fit what you described earlier as being perfect opponents for him. And the 2 names that come to mind are Stanley Ketchel and Harry Greb, both fighters that are clearly all-time greats. One knocked down in his prime by a jealous husband, and the other by losing his eyesight, and he wasn't as old as people think after almost 300 fights, but both were great. How do you see, and I say the eyesight, it was an operation on a broken nose, I believe it was him. How do you see Hagler faring against Ketchel and Harry Greb?
God, it's tough. I do think that's definitely the conversation to have. That's not, I don't think that's far-fetched at all to think that he could compete with those guys and do very well. Because I do think that we're talking about a guy who's top 5 middleweight of all time. The only guys that you're going to put alongside him are Sugar Ray Robinson, Harry Greb, Carlos Monzon, and like you said, Stanley Ketchel, arguably Mickey Walker. and then there's Marvin Hagler. I mean, that's so what's that? 6 guys, and you could I would argue that Hagler's probably 3rd or 4th. I think Ray Robinson beats him. Harry Greb, I don't know. The toughness. I think the idea that Marvin knew enough about himself that he thought he would do well because of the way Greb charged people. I think that makes me lean towards Hagler. Plus, I got him on my arm. Of course, I like him. And I do think that there's something about the modern era that even though the toughness of the older guys was without question, and the availability of opponents, so they just saw more styles. I do think that just plain blunt force trauma, strength training, all those stuff would have given Hagler maybe a little bit of edge against a Greb and a Ketchel, just because people have gotten stronger, I don't know, but I think that's the other thing that makes him. I think I'm going to take a pass on saying who would win, but I do think that it's competitive, and I think that's the other thing about it that's awesome is that, and that we can't do anymore, is that Marvin Hagler was from the age of 15-round fights, and that's a big those things. Can't help but think when people say, oh, well, Golovkin would have done well with any of these guys, or Floyd Mayweather would have done well with all these guys. Well, one thing they never did was fight a 15-round bout.
Yeah,
so
I hate.
Sort of an asterisk.
Hey, we got somebody in one of the chat rooms that knows you because he said, and he's been upgraded on his arm. So Sean is giving a shout out to you. But anyway. That's something to run through Title Bout and fill me in on how it came out next show.
I could do that for next week if you like. Put him in there against the middleweight greats.
Because we got some good fights coming up. Whether we do a show next week or the week after, we'll definitely be back. But in any event, Alex, it's been great. The fire's relit. Let's just get rid of COVID, and then I'll be back to my old grouchy ass self.
Have you been vaccinated?
No, did we talk about that? Have you?
I'm going to try to register again today. My age group opened up on Friday, but every time I've gone on there, they'll be like, try back in 30 minutes.
Well, so what are you saying? That my age group, I had more opportunities? Well,
I don't know how your state's doing it, but our state's doing it by age group, and they're on the 46 to 54-year-old. So, yeah, I'm in that.
Well, our state is bullies. We're the bully state. If you don't want to go to a hotel room with Cuomo, he'll bully you.
Right,
so, but I don't know.
I tell you, I wish I lost my access to Photoshop because I really wanted to put myself into one of those creepy pictures with him.
Well, I tell you about the vaccination. It makes me nervous about them. But if since our government now is forcing us to do things and eliminating our freedom of speech and censoring what we watch and listen to, since all of that's already taken place, if I don't get vaccinated, I'm sure that the police are going to be at my door, ready to remove me. But take a choice, I think I'd go with that Johnson & Johnson, and I'll tell you why. Not that I'm promoting their products, but from what I understand, they've done a more the way the vaccinations, the testing has been more of the way it used to be and more thorough than some of the others. So I feel a little safer, even though it's not as effective, I guess. It's only 89 versus the other ones. Plus, it's a one-shot deal, which...
A one-shot, yeah.
But
I have you ever seen the movie Mimic? That's a really good one with Guillermo del Toro, and the way they dealt with a horrible disease actually was by genetic manipulation, and things did not go well.
Yeah, no, and that's what scares me about this, but we'll see. But Alex, it's been great. Look forward to next time, brother.
All right, Billy C. Take care.
See you later. to my man Alex Papali giving us his thoughts, and we'll keep you up to date. We are going to be doing some more shows, but in any event, hey, listen, it's that time again where I got to say goodbye. But I want to thank, first of all, a shout out to my man Sal Rocky Senecola, and hopefully next show we do, he'll be part of. Like I said earlier, I spoke to him the other day, and he has officially told me he has got another win on his professional record, and this time it's against a foe that very rarely loses in cancer. So shout out to my man Sal. I love you, miss you, and look forward to doing a show real soon. I also want to thank our sponsors, Title Bout Championship Computer Game, Southern Gourmet Spice, and of course my book, Tom Molyneux, from Bondage to the Baddest Man on the Planet. Get yourself a copy. I am telling you that this book will make it to the big screen. We're working on that as we speak. I probably shouldn't have said that. This has been discussed in the past. It just takes a long time, but we're closer now than we ever were before. So my final thoughts on Marvin Hagler. He's going to be missed. Was one of the all-time great middleweights. Never will we see fights like he was in my opinion, again, nor will we find fighters like him. I say this all the time. The 80s were considered the last great era of boxing. If someone asked me that in 1986 or 1987 or 1989, if I thought I was witnessing the last great era of boxing, I would have laughed, because the previous eras were so much more exciting in my mind back then. But to fast forward it all these years later and to see the condition the sport's in right now, it's very easy for me to say that the 1980s was the last great era in the sport of boxing. We will never get to that point again because of just the way society has become. We're afraid to speak our mind. Everybody's afraid to offend each other. You know, no matter what you say, you're a racist. We were being hassled today in this one of the chat rooms because of it, because I said something about Deontay Wilder, which is true. He does not have talent. He's got punching power. That's it. That's not talent in the sport of boxing. You need more than that. He was successful and became a world champion with that power, so I give him credit for that. And hopefully financially he's set for the rest of his life. Whether he comes back or not, I don't know. But the attitude and mental fortitude of fighters today is nothing like it was, and it will never go back. Same thing with sports. Alex made a comment earlier, with all sports I meant. Alex made a comment earlier. There's always been the question, are fighters from yesteryear better than fighters of today? The answer is no. The fighters of today are technically better. We're bigger, we're faster, we're stronger, we know how to eat, we scientifically know how to work different muscles. You look at one of my all-time favorite fighters in Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson was considered a monster in his time. He wasn't 6'1". He was 6'1.5", 217 pounds. This was a monster of his day. Today, he would be a small heavyweight. So it just goes to show you that we've changed, and so has boxing. And although I miss yesteryear, and if we had that mental part of the game that we used to have today, we would be treated to really a great era of boxing. But because the athletes themselves and the fans, for the most part, aren't willing to take that risk, which is a risk. You take a risk every time you step in a ring for not coming out the same or even alive. But you're taking that same risk in most contact sports. We're overly careful. It is what it is. I'm too old to fight anymore. So I'd be a hypocrite. But it is what it is. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for all our sponsorships. We will be back soon. Drop me an email. We will be reading emails. I had a ton of them. A lot of them were outdated. But drop me an email. Give me your thoughts. Billy@TalkinBoxing, TalkinBoxing.com. Until next time, make sure you tune in. Same bat time, same bat channel. Until then, ciao, baby.